Welcome to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, brought to you by Pilma. This podcast helps lead lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Here is your legal marketing expert and host, Ken Hardison.
Well, hello, everyone. This is Ken Hardison, and welcome to another episode of Grow Your Law Firm. And today we have the pleasure and honor of having Liel Levy of Nanato Media out of Austin, Texas. And you can see, well, the listeners can't see, but he is recently, him and his wife have written a new book called Beyond Habla, Español, How Lawyers Win the Hispanic Market. And I was honest with Liel. I read about half the book as soon as I got back, and I said, I want this guy on our podcast with our listeners and our viewers. So, Liel, thank you for agreeing to be on our podcast, my friend.
Ken, I couldn't be more happy to be here. I'm a big Pilma fan. I've been at the conferences. I follow the podcast. It's just a real honor, right? To have made it all the way here really means a lot to me and to our agency. So thank you so much for the invite.
And by the way, I also had a speaker that dropped out on Wednesday, the first day. And I just asked Liel just 5 minutes ago, would he consider speaking at our event? And he graciously agreed. And so I'm excited about that because somehow this year, I have nothing on the agenda about Hispanic marketing, and that was my bad. And I guess everything works out for the best. So we had somebody dropped out for health reasons. And so, you know, when one door closes, another door opens, right?
Well, thank you so much for the invite. We're super excited to join you again at another Super Summit event, particularly after the year that we've had and we're all coming out of. So I think there's a lot of reasons to be excited. And I hope that speaker that dropped ends up recovering, and hopefully you'll join us to another summit at some other point.
Yeah, absolutely. And for people that don't know, probably you'll be announced by the time that our listeners hear this, but we are converting it to a hybrid. What I mean by that is we're doing live streaming and in person. So if you buy a ticket and you're planning on going, but then you decide you don't want to go, you can still watch it live. And plus you'll get some unedited videos, probably a couple of weeks afterwards. So we're trying to pivot because of COVID. Seems to be a surge. We do know that we're going to have rules where you have to wear a mask if you're not eating or drinking. You also have to have either a vaccine card showing you got a vaccine or a test showing negative results within 72 hours before you enter the building. And that's not Pilma's rules. That is New Orleans and the state of Louisiana's rules, which I think are good rules with everything that's going on. That might change by the time we get down there, but I don't think it will. So, I mean, you know, I've had a vaccines. So I'm really, with the other precautions they're doing, I feel very comfortable. And I'll be honest with you, I did not leave my house for 15 months when it started. I did not leave my house. I had my groceries delivered. I was a hermit. So I take it seriously, and but I feel pretty darn safe about it and feel confident that, you know, we're going to have we might not have a full house, but I think we'll have 2/3 full house, you know.
Yeah.
We'll see. We got close to 300 people already registered, and we still got another 6 weeks as we stand here today talking. So let's get right down to it. Tell me your story, Liel. How did you get started in this business?
Well, that's actually quite a story to tell, but I actually got started in legal marketing pretty much by just watching my family do business, right? I have an uncle who in the 80s started a joint advertising agency in Los Angeles doing advertising for personal injury and workers' compensation cases amongst the Hispanic community. And so when I was 3-4-year-old, I used to come and visit, spend the summers in Los Angeles, and then spend the weekends at the ferias y kermeses with the Hispanic community, handing balloons and spreading the word about my uncle's brand and company. And that company grew and grew quite big to the point that it became pretty much best known personal injury and workers' compensation brand among Hispanics in big markets like Chicago, like New York, like Los Angeles. And so I had the chance to grow also with that company and then work on intake and work on business development. And at one point, I realized, Ken, that things started to shift. A lot of lawyers started to understand that they don't necessarily need to rely on joint advertising or lead generation to actually be able to capture the Hispanic market. They can actually build their brand within that community. And that actually resonated very well with what I see trending and what I think is the best path for law firms to pursue the Hispanic market. And so we've decided at that point, me and my partner, to establish Nanato Media as a solution for law firms that want to effectively target a Hispanic market, but don't necessarily have the resources in-house to do it effectively.
So why should a law firm want to focus on Hispanic marketing, a PI firm?
Right. So there's two sides to that answer, right? But the bottom line is that it's a business growth decision. It's that simple. I wish that the reason why everyone would want to target a Hispanic market is because they are leading their law firm from a place where diversity and inclusion is central to their values. But even if you don't necessarily align with that, it is still a good business decision. So here's why. And this is not just me talking about it. This is just the census results just announced last week from last year, right? So just listen to these numbers. Right now, there are 98% of Americans are living in a county that is seeing Hispanic population growth. 98% of Americans, of all Americans, right? And the Hispanic population is growing at a rate of 1.5 million per year. By 2045, they would be, or they will represent up to 80% of the total population growth. So it's a matter of being relevant in your market on the long run. If you don't engage with the Hispanic market, you're basically declining market share from the get-go. And here's the thing, is that other law firms are going to go after it. And the less relevant you become in your market, the less chances you're going to have to succeed on the long game. That is one of the reasons. Now, another thing that is super important is that people still sometimes think of the Hispanic market as something that is niche and only happening in certain parts of the country, right? People say, well, I'm not in LA, I'm not in Florida, I'm not in Texas. Why should I care about the Hispanic market? And so for those, I would like to share just some stats, which is really mind-blowing. And it's which markets have had the fastest growth over the past 10 years. And so here are the top 4: North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, New Hampshire, and then the 5th would be Washington, D.C. And so none of those would be your usual suspects. None of them are in the South. And these are the fastest Hispanic market growths that we've seen over the past 10 years, right? And this is not my data. This is all public government data. So there's definitely a massive opportunity there. And these markets, the last ones that I've just mentioned here, are markets that have been pretty much overlooked by law firms. And so this is the time to actually go capture and get to win that market before somebody else does it.
Yeah, and I was looking at the news the other night, and it seems to be, you got the stats there in front of you, but the Hispanic forest part of the population in the United States is number 2. It's bigger than the African American.
Yeah, and by a lot. The Hispanics are already close to 20%, where I believe the African Americans is about 12%. So it's quite meaningful. And people, just don't necessarily acknowledge it or are aware of it. And that's what our book is all about. It's about creating that awareness. It's about showing the data and the facts of what's really happening and where are the opportunities lying.
So a lot of times, Liel, lawyers come to me and say, well, I want to do it, but I don't speak Spanish. I don't speak Mexican. And I just don't feel comfortable because I don't know how to speak it. And then I'm going to have to be relying on everybody else. And I don't know. What do you tell those lawyers?
It's not a matter about you personally as the lawyer speaking Spanish. It's about, is your law firm accessible to Spanish speakers, right? What we've encountered in our years of experience is that Latinos Spanish speakers particularly, they don't necessarily expect for the lawyer to speak Spanish to them. They, however, do expect that if the law firm is engaging with them in Spanish. So when they call, somebody will be able to speak in Spanish to them. Or when they come for an appointment, somebody will be available to help them communicate or translate whenever they're talking with someone that doesn't necessarily speak Spanish. So it's not a matter of you, the main lawyer managing partner, is a requirement for you to speak Spanish to be successful. We have clients that they do not speak Spanish, yet they're pretty much owning the Hispanic market in their local markets. And we have clients that are Spanish speakers and they're leveraging that to better position themselves. So you need to be smart about your marketing, what your messaging is, and how are you gonna talk about yourself to really stand out and be appealing to them. But I can certainly tell you that speaking Spanish is not a requirement, and it's not a roadblock for you to actually stand a chance to succeed at this market. There are other factors that will play more critical roles in actually determining whether your campaign stands a chance or not.
So I talked to you this about before we started, and I'm going to ask you again for the audience because I was surprised by your answer, but logically it made sense. So a lot of times when we're in like our masterminds at Pilma and we're talking about it, some lawyers say, well, depends on where you're at. If you're in Miami, you need to be, Cubans are different than Mexicans. And if you're in Puerto Rico, or you've got an area that's Puerto Rican or Portuguese or Central Latin America, you have to look at different things. And I ask you again, is this true or not true?
So there is truth in there, right? It's 100% important. You're touching on the cultural identity side of things, and that's going to definitely play a role. And you definitely want to consider that when you're creating your campaign. However, as an agency and as marketing experts, we believe that there is some more important segmentation to be done when dealing with Hispanics, and that's the acculturation segmentation. And what acculturation measures and the way that it segments Hispanic is by how much time they've been in the United States and how integrated they are into American society. Because you have Latinos that they are third, fourth, fifth generation Latinos here in the United States. And those, we call them Americanizados because they're pretty much English speakers. They do have an inclination for businesses that acknowledge their Hispanic heritage, but they don't necessarily speak Spanish, right? And so now you're talking about a market that you can 100% should be targeting, but you don't necessarily not do it in Spanish. Now, when you compare that to Hispanos or Latinoamericanos, we're talking here about two segments that both arrive to the United States as adults, yet their first language continues to be Spanish. They continue to engage, interact in their communities in Spanish and such. And so that segment, you're going to want to market them in a slightly different way. Now, if you are in a very, very big Hispanic community, then you need to do another layer of segmentation where you're going to be looking at the other elements that you've mentioned, Ken, right? What countries they come from and such. And I think that's an effective approach to take, particularly when you're in very big markets, right? If you're in New York, if you're in Miami, if you're in Los Angeles, if you're in some parts of Texas, that approach can absolutely help you differentiate yourself, but it's not the starting point. And also, I do want to tell lawyers, you don't have to overcomplicate things, right? You can also start with a more basic strategy with a very standard message in Spanish, right? You don't need to get into very complex lingo to talk to the Hispanic market in order to get their attention.
So I got another question, and I don't know if it's a myth or urban myth, but I'm asking because you're the man. I've always heard that the women, like a husband-wife deal in Hispanic, the wife is quiet, but she really makes the decisions. That she stands behind the man, and the man's doing a lot of the talking, but the woman, he's not going to make a move without getting okay from the woman. Is that true or wrong? Or was that good? Was that true 20 years ago and now it's not as true?
I think it's more the latter. Things have changed. Society has evolved. I think there's that perception that, I'll tell you what it is true in what you're saying there is that Latinos are very family oriented. They make decisions collectively. And as a law firm and as part of you designing your client experience and preparing your law firm to handle the Hispanic market, you need to understand that you're not just representing the client, you're taking care of the entire family, right? They're going to come, la abuela, la mamá, they're all going to come together to the office. They're all going to ask questions. You're going to get calls potentially from several of them because that's the way that we behave. Now, I wouldn't necessarily say that, your messaging needs to be crafted only thinking of the man or the woman. You definitely need to understand who your buyer persona is. You definitely need to understand who is most likely to have the type of cases that you are interested in landing, and then building your message around that. I wouldn't necessarily be biased towards those politics that play inside families, because they're not necessarily applicable to all. And I'll tell you another thing, Ken. One other misconception that exists out there is that, parents are the ones making the decisions, just like you've said. But in reality, what we're seeing a lot now is that the younger generations, the sons and sometimes the grandchildren, are the ones who are Googling and actually making the phone calls to find help and representation for their older family members, be they their grandparents or their parents.
Hey, all you listeners. Be sure to join us at the 2021 Pilma Super Summit in Washington, D.C. at the Grand Hyatt Hotel, September 29 to October 2nd. For more details, be sure to check out our website at www.pilma.org. That's www.pilmma.org. Thank you very much.
Yeah, this is what I've always found, and I don't know if it's changed, but when I practiced law, I found that if you, when they hired you, the Hispanics, and you did a good job for them, man, they were with you for life. They're very loyal, and they bring all their friends and family. I mean, if you did a good job and if you could get that trust and do a good job and they trusted you, they would refer 2 or 3 times more than Anglos. I'm just telling you. I don't know.
That's 100%. You're right. And so that's why one of the strategies that law firms do sometimes is, particularly those interested in personal injury, they go the immigration route. They do immigration not because of the case values of the immigration cases, but to establish the connection with the Latino community, right? To get Latinos on their client base. So when the personal injury cases come, they'll come back. At that point, you are the abogado. Eres el abogado de la familia. So they're going to come back for whatever it is that you need, whether it's criminal, whether it's personal injury, or whether it's a bankruptcy. And then you'll refer them out and you'll keep whichever cases you want. But that's the big picture.
Well, good. I've got all these myths that I've heard. I've got them either confirmed or straightened out. And I'm glad we did that today, because this is stuff that's been on my mind for several years now. So where in the world do you get started doing this, man? Where do you go? I mean, because it's a lot of lawyers, they know how to do it to Anglo-Saxons, but they do not know where to get started with the Hispanic market.
Yeah. So I always recommend start by going where people are searching for lawyers, right? So if people are searching for lawyers in Google, then go to Google and start there. And that's the same basically as you've said. That's what you would potentially do if you were trying to market your law firm to the English-speaking market. You would go to Google, you will initiate, you put up a website, you will try to get some local relevancy, run some ads, do some SEO, and be discoverable for these people. And exactly the same is that you need to do for the Spanish-speaking market. However, I will tell you is that depending where you are, in which part of the country you are, pay-per-click can be a terrific opportunity for you, because you may really have no competition or very little. And so you can very quickly position yourself as the to-go choice for your local Hispanic market. And that is a powerful position to have because there is demand.
Absolutely. So I want to ask you about Google display ads. Do you like them? Should lawyers be using them? Are they effective with Hispanic marketing?
They do, actually. They do. Of course, display ads, need to have a strategy to back them up. And so we think that these type of ads can be very effective if you are running them as part of a behavior-based segmentation campaign. So you're actually targeting people that have searched and completed certain particular search queries that are of certain relevance to your practice area, and therefore potentially bring you some leads that are somewhere between the mid and the top of the funnel. And so that is why they do have value. But the bottom line is that, like any other sort of awareness strategy, you're still talking to a broader audience that don't necessarily are considering at this point hiring an attorney. But the bottom line is that you're getting impressions, you're getting visibility, people are seeing you, they're getting familiar with your law firm. And so this is a great channel to get brand awareness, brand recognition at a very, very low cost per impression and very low cost per click. So yes, I do think there is value in it. I do, however, think that it's not very reliable as a standalone strategy. I think it's a way to supplement a more high intent strategy like a search campaign.
So on your website, do you recommend that you have it where they can click and go to Spanish language versus English language?
I 100% think that you need to start shifting the way that you're marketing your law firm to take a multicultural approach. If your community has a Hispanic community, then you definitely need to have your website also available in Spanish. Now, I'll say this, if you have a large Vietnamese community or Ethiopian or Chinese community, you should also have your website available in those languages. It's as simple as that. It's about being able to capture and increase your market share. Now, I just want to point out that there are ways of doing it. I won't recommend you to take a Google Translate plugin and put it on your website and then get your website to automatically translate into Spanish, because the messaging is going to be all messed up. You're going to end up having literal translations that just do not read the way that you're probably intending the messaging to come across. And so sometimes it just ends up backfiring because you're either not communicating clearly to your target market, or you can just end up coming up as tone deaf.
So when you do your PPC, your pay-per-click, do you do that in Spanish, or do you just do it in English, or both? Or how do you do that?
Yeah, you should do it in both. You should 100% leverage the opportunity to be present and be discoverable for your Spanish-speaking community that is searching for lawyers in Spanish, 100%. And so obviously these are different, a completely different campaign. Your campaigns are going to be written in Spanish. They're going to be taking the user to a landing page in Spanish. Hopefully the phone calls that are going to be coming out of this campaign are also going to be answered in Spanish. So you're just basically creating a strategy that is specific and relevant to your Spanish-speaking community. And one thing I do want to point out there, Ken, is that you also need to understand, right? You may be a personal injury lawyer and you may be in one market and you may be very well familiar with your English-speaking market. That doesn't mean that your strategy in Spanish is going to be a replica of that. And one thing, just to give you a simple example of what is one of the considerations that you potentially may need to have when you're actually crafting a campaign in Spanish is, for instance, to an English speaker, you probably wouldn't necessarily mention on a PI ad that, you can have a case no matter what your legal status is, because most of English speakers don't worry about legal status as a qualifier to have a case or not. But when you're running campaigns in Spanish, people do tend to worry about legal status because not all of them are legal residents of the United States. So they're afraid, and they need to be reassured that whether they have the right or not of being in the United States legally, if they've been injured in a car accident, they can still have a case and they're entitled to a compensation. So you see, the messaging needs to be delivered with a different underlying value proposition.
Very good, very good. So how about, you think like Telemundo and these TV stations, Hispanic TV stations, do they work?
Yes, they do work. I would say, though, if you're getting started, start with digital. You have a much more effective channel of getting in front of, as I've just mentioned, Latinos who are searching for lawyers and they're ready to hire you right now. And as your campaign is starting to grow and as you're becoming more comfortable and more efficient at handling and dealing with the Hispanic market, then you obviously want to expand, right? TV and radio still continue to give you exposure to particular segments of the Hispanic community that potentially you may not be able to reach through social. And even if you are reaching them through social, the positioning of TV still carries a weight that has value in the Hispanic community from the standpoint of perception. The amount of the authority that it hands you over appearing on TV, those have some weight. So I don't want to say that you have to 100% start with TV. Probably I would recommend you not to start with TV. First, test the market with some digital campaigns, but then keep in mind that as you're growing and as you're expanding, you want to definitely don't just stick to the digital, because the digital is going to get tired and you can only subtract extract from it so much, you're going to have to expand and look for new channels and venues to continue your brand building efforts.
The one thing I found at the Hispanic TV markets, they charge even higher than regular cable, and cable charges a lot more than just regular broadcast. So it just keeps going up.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's still the deal, but that's what it was when I was buying it.
You're right. It will depend, really, it will depend market by market, but the CPM on Spanish TV, on Spanish radio, it's not necessarily the cheapest. And I do want to point out that even on Facebook, the CPM is not going to be your cheapest. And that's why the search network, you want to leverage that as much as you can, yet your conversion rates on both Facebook, radio, and TV are going to be at a higher rate than they are in potentially your English-speaking ads. So, even though your CPM is higher, you may still have a lower cost per acquisition. So you need to look at more metrics than just cost per impressions.
So you're talking about social media and you mentioned Facebook. So have you been successful in getting PI workers' comp cases off of Facebook ads?
I think PI is a little bit tired on Facebook, and not just in Spanish, in every single, in every single language that you can think of. I think it's been overused, but I do think that Facebook is a terrific platform for building awareness for less known case types. And so there's a massive opportunity there for masters. Masters targeting the Hispanic market, right? Which, believe it or not, it's not something that a lot of the bigger law firms are actually doing that are after masters. And so there's a massive opportunity there. We've done it very effectively, talcum powder and some other masters that actually, just had a lot of relevancy within the Hispanic market because they are users of these type of products. So I think it's very effective for that. I think other type of cases that you can get from Facebook that is still effective would be workers' compensation, some type of work injuries, construction and such. You can still generate some good returns from Facebook. I think particularly MBAs is what it's a little bit no longer that attainable on Facebook. But again, it's about building your brand as well. And so the visibility that these social platforms give you has a value, even though if it doesn't translate as actual conversions that have cases behind them, they play a role in your attribution of new cases.
More branding than direct response then.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
Good deal. So is there anything that I have not asked you that I should have asked you before we finish up here today? Because this has been great, by the way. Thank you.
It's really, really my pleasure. I would say, again, you'd ask very, very, very good questions. And I think we've covered a lot here. I would just say to your audience, don't cling to cliches about the Hispanic market and outdated misconceptions about the barriers that exist about what Hispanics like, how do they look like. They are all look and act one particular way. The Latino community here in the United States have already become very, very, very diverse. You can actually engage with the Hispanic market and just do English campaigns. If that is the audience that you're interested in targeting, you can focus on the Spanish-speaking market. It's very big and very diverse. And so I think, you definitely just need to change your perception a little bit, start seeing things from an insider standpoint. And that's what we're trying to give readers through our book, a different introduction to this market that's just continuing to grow.
So if somebody wants to get up with you, or first let me ask you, your book, is it book on Amazon, or how do they get a copy of the book?
Yeah, it's very easy. You can go to Amazon and you can search for it, and you'll see it there. You can go to our website. We have a link where you can go to Amazon and get it. You can get an ebook, a paperback, hardcover, endless options for you to get an opportunity to read the book. Thank you very much for bringing it up. And yes, again, it's all about learning more about the Hispanic market, but also another important topic that we cover in the book, Ken, is just explaining how digital marketing works and try to help lawyers be more informed and help them make better decisions, right? I think it's all about knowing enough so that you can distinguish when you're sitting at a table with a marketing agency, with a pay-per-click manager, with media buy agent, you can at least have a sense of distance's chance of working or not, and you're not just kind of falling victim to what they're telling you to do. And that's really the goal of the book. From that standpoint, is for you to be able to have an opinion and understand the logic behind what makes things work in digital.
And contact information if somebody wants to pick your brain or hire you.
Please feel free to reach out in LinkedIn. You can find me at Liel Levy in LinkedIn. You can find me on my website, nanatomedia.com, or anywhere you want. I'm also going to be at the Pilma Super Summit, and so we can definitely connect there. And any questions you have, we love just having conversation about Hispanic market. Try to troubleshoot through some of the potential challenges that you're facing, and hopefully help you come out with a solution.
Thank you so much, Leo.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you for having me. As I said, couldn't be happier to be here.
All right. So until next time, this is Ken Hardison, dedicated to your success. Thank you.
You have been listening to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, the podcast that leads lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Go to growyourlawfirm.com to find more ways to market and manage your law firm. Please leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts.